What if the worst day of your life was something you'd already seen in your dreams? What if your subconscious mind could access information about future tragedies, sending you warnings through vivid nighttime visions that felt more real than reality itself? Throughout history, there have been documented cases of people who dreamed about disasters before they happened, with such startling accuracy that coincidence becomes impossible to accept as an explanation. The most chilling example comes from the highest office in American history. 3 days before his assassination, President Abraham Lincoln told his bodyguard Ward Hill Layman about a dream that would haunt the nation for generations. In the dream, Lincoln found himself walking through the White House, drawn by the sound of weeping that echoed through the halls. He followed the mournful cries until he reached the East Room, where he discovered a shocking scene. A casket lay on a platform, surrounded by soldiers standing guard and mourners dressed in black. The weeping was coming from people who had gathered to pay their respects to someone who had died. Lincoln approached one of the soldiers and asked who had passed away. The soldier's response sent chills through the future president's soul. The president, he was killed by an assassin. When Lincoln looked into the casket, he saw his own face, peaceful in death, surrounded by flowers and final tributes. Lincoln woke from this dream deeply disturbed, but he dismissed it as the result of the tremendous stress he was under during the final months of the Civil War. He shared the dream with his wife Mary and his bodyguard, treating it as an interesting curiosity rather than a genuine warning. On the evening of April 14, 1865, less than 72 hours after recounting this prophetic dream, Abraham Lincoln was shot by John Wilkes Booth while watching a play at Ford's Theater. His body was displayed in the East Room of the White House, exactly as he had seen in his dream. But Lincoln's prophetic dream was not an isolated incident. History is filled with similar cases where ordinary people received extraordinary warnings about impending disasters. The tragedy of the Titanic in 1912 was foreshadowed by at least 19 documented prophetic dreams, experienced by people who had no connection to each other and no way of knowing what was to come. Alex Mackenzie, a Scottish immigrant, was walking up the gangway to board the Titanic at Southampton when he suddenly heard a voice in his head telling him not to get on the ship. The warning was so clear and so urgent that he turned around and walked back down the gangway, despite having spent his life savings on the ticket. His parents were furious, calling him foolish for throwing away such an expensive opportunity. 3 days later, when news of the Titanic sinking reached them, they understood that Alex's inexplicable fear had saved his life. Margaret Hayes, who did board the ship, had been troubled for weeks before the voyage by dreams of the Titanic sinking in icy waters. She saw herself floating in a lifeboat, watching the great ship disappear beneath the waves while hundreds of people screamed for help in the darkness. The dreams were so vivid and disturbing that she almost canceled her trip, but her family convinced her that she was simply nervous about the ocean voyage. Margaret survived the disaster in lifeboat number 7, exactly as she had seen in her dreams.
Even more remarkable was the case of Morgan Robertson, a struggling writer who published a novel called Futility in 1898, 14 years before the Titanic disaster. His book told the story of a massive ocean liner called the Titan that was considered unsinkable but sank after hitting an iceberg in the North Atlantic during an April voyage. The similarities between his fictional ship and the real Titanic were so precise that many people accused him of having supernatural knowledge. Robertson insisted that he had simply used his knowledge of shipbuilding and ocean travel to create a realistic fictional scenario, but the parallels were too exact to dismiss as mere coincidence. The phenomenon of disaster premonitions reached horrifying new depths with the Aberfan tragedy of 1966. On October 21st, a massive coal waste heap collapsed in the Welsh mining village of Aberfan, creating a black avalanche that buried the local elementary school and killed 144 people, including 116 children. But in the days leading up to the disaster, several children in the village had experienced dreams that seemed to predict the tragedy. 8-year-old Paul Davies drew a picture the day before the disaster showing figures digging in a hillside with the words, "The End," written above them. 10-year-old Errol Mai Jones told her mother she had dreamed that something black had come down over her school and that she wasn't afraid to die. Both children perished the next day when the coal waste engulfed their classroom. these weren't the only prophetic dreams recorded before Aberfan. Psychiatrist John Barker, who investigated the disaster, collected over 60 reports from residents who had experienced premonitory dreams or visions in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. The consistency of these reports, combined with their specific details about black masses, buried schools, and dying children, suggested that some form of collective unconscious warning had been trying to alert the community to the approaching catastrophe. The pattern continued into modern times with the September 11th attacks. Eamon McEnany, a financial services professional who worked in the World Trade Center, had been experiencing anxiety dreams about terrorist attacks on his building for months before the actual event. He told his wife that he had a feeling he wouldn't survive the year 2001 and that something terrible was going to happen at his workplace. On the morning of September 11th, he suffered a bout of vertigo while leaving for work, and his wife urged him to stay home. Despite his own premonitions and his wife's concerns, McEnany decided to go to work as usual. He died in the attacks, along with nearly 3,000 other victims. What makes these cases so compelling is not just their accuracy, but their emotional specificity. These weren't vague feelings of unease or general anxiety about travel or workplace safety. They were detailed, vivid experiences that matched the actual events with startling precision. Lincoln saw his own funeral. Titanic passengers dreamed of lifeboats and icy water. The Aberfan children saw black masses covering their school, and McEnany visualized terrorist attacks on his specific building.
The question that haunts researchers is whether these dreams represent genuine glimpses into future events, or whether they reveal something more complex about the relationship between consciousness, intuition, and the patterns that lead to tragedy. Could the human mind somehow detect subtle environmental changes, social tensions, or statistical probabilities that consciously we're not aware of? Or do these cases suggest that time itself is not as linear as we believe, allowing consciousness to occasionally access information from what we consider the future? Carl Jung, the renowned psychiatrist, had his own experience with prophetic dreams that seemed to predict World War I. In 1913, a full year before the war began, Jung dreamed of a monstrous flood covering all of Europe between the North Sea and the Alps. He saw the floating rubble of civilization and the drowned bodies of uncounted thousands, with the entire sea turning to blood. 2 weeks later, he had a similar dream, and this time he heard a voice telling him, "Look at it well, it is wholly real, and it will be so. You cannot doubt it." Jung's dreams proved to be remarkably accurate predictions of the devastating impact World War I would have on European civilization. The massive casualties, the destruction of traditional social structures, and the transformation of the continent into what he called bloody landscapes of death and decay, all matched his prophetic visions from the year before the conflict began. These historical cases raise profound questions about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to time. If dreams can accurately predict specific future events, then our understanding of causality, free will, and the structure of reality itself may need to be reconsidered. But more importantly, for those of us living in the present, these cases suggest that our own dreams might contain warnings that we're not recognizing or taking seriously. The patterns are consistent across cultures, time periods, and types of disasters. People receive specific, detailed information about future tragedies through their dreams, often accompanied by strong emotional reactions that make the dreams memorable and disturbing. Some people heed these warnings and avoid disaster, while others dismiss them as mere anxiety or fantasy and suffer the consequences. This raises the crucial question: are these documented cases the rare exceptions, or are prophetic dreams far more common than we realize? Could thousands of people be receiving warnings about future events every night, only to forget them as meaningless dreams when they wake up? The answer to these questions might determine whether we view dreams as random neural activity during sleep, or as a sophisticated early warning system that evolution has provided to help us navigate an uncertain and often dangerous world. The evidence suggests that our dreams might be far more important and far more practical than we ever imagined. The question is, what warnings might your own dreams be trying to give you, and are you prepared to listen? The historical cases we explored raise a fundamental question that science has been grappling with for decades. Are prophetic dreams genuine glimpses into future events? Or can they be explained by the remarkable pattern recognition abilities of the human unconscious mind? Recent research suggests that the answer may be far more complex and fascinating than either simple explanation can accommodate. Dr. Carolyn Watt at the University of Edinburgh has spent over 15 years studying the psychological factors that contribute to precognitive dream experiences. Her research reveals that people who report prophetic dreams share certain characteristics that set them apart from the general population. They tend to have higher levels of what psychologists call dream recall frequency, meaning they remember their dreams more vividly and more often than average. They also score higher on measures of intuitive thinking and show greater sensitivity to subtle environmental cues that others might miss completely. But the most significant discovery in Dr. Watt's research involves what she terms selective memory reinforcement. When people experience a dream that later seems to predict a real event, their brains actually restructure the memory of that dream to make it seem more accurate than it originally was. This isn't conscious deception or wishful thinking. It's an automatic neurological process that enhances the similarity between the dream memory and the actual event, creating the impression of supernatural accuracy where none existed. However, this psychological explanation becomes insufficient when confronted with cases like the Aberfan disaster, where multiple people independently reported similar prophetic dreams with specific details that were later verified. Dr. Watt's team investigated this phenomenon and discovered something remarkable. In communities facing high levels of environmental stress, whether from industrial dangers, natural disaster risks, or social tensions, the rate of prophetic dreams increases dramatically in the weeks and months before actual disasters occur. This suggests that the unconscious mind might be far more sophisticated at processing threat-related information than we previously understood. The human brain constantly monitors thousands of environmental variables, from subtle changes in air pressure and electromagnetic fields to barely perceptible shifts in social behavior and communication patterns. Most of this processing happens below the threshold of conscious awareness, but during sleep, when conscious filtering mechanisms are relaxed, this information might surface as symbolic dreams that feel prophetic. Dr. Julia Mossbridge at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has taken this research in a different direction, studying what she calls anticipatory physiological responses. Her experiments show that the human nervous system begins responding to emotionally significant events up to 10 seconds before those events actually occur. Heart rate, skin conductance, and brainwave patterns all shift in ways that suggest the body is preparing for something that the conscious mind hasn't yet perceived. When this anticipatory response research is applied to dream studies, the results are even more intriguing. People who report prophetic dreams show measurably different sleep patterns in the nights preceding significant events in their lives. Their REM sleep becomes more intense, their dream recall improves, and their brains show unusual activity in the regions associated with temporal processing and future planning. It's as if their sleeping minds are working overtime to prepare them for challenges that haven't yet manifested. The practical implications of this research are profound. If dreams can serve as an early warning system for both personal and environmental threats, then learning to recognize and interpret these signals could literally be a matter of life and death. The key is distinguishing between anxiety-driven dreams that reflect current worries and genuine prophetic dreams that contain specific, actionable information about future events. Genuine prophetic dreams share several distinctive characteristics that separate them from ordinary stress dreams or wish fulfillment fantasies. First, they tend to be unusually vivid and emotionally intense, often waking the dreamer with a sense of urgency or dread that persists throughout the following day. Second, they contain specific, concrete details rather than vague symbols or general feelings of unease. Third, they often feature elements that seem impossible or illogical at the time of the dream, but make perfect sense once the predicted event occurs. Most importantly, prophetic dreams frequently involve people, places, or situations that the dreamer has no current reason to be concerned about. While anxiety dreams typically focus on existing fears or problems, prophetic dreams often introduce entirely new scenarios that feel both foreign and somehow inevitable. This distinction is crucial for anyone attempting to develop their own dream-based early warning system. The process begins with maintaining a detailed dream journal, but not in the casual way most people approach dream recording. Research shows that prophetic dreamers benefit from a specific protocol that captures both the content and the context of their dream experiences. Each morning, immediately upon waking, record not just what happened in the dream, but how the dream felt, what emotions it generated, and what specific details seemed most significant or unusual. Pay particular attention to dreams that feature unfamiliar locations, people you don't recognize, or events that seem to have no connection to your current life circumstances. These are often the dreams that prove to be most prophetic, because they're drawing information from sources beyond your immediate conscious awareness. Document the date, time, and your emotional state when you woke up, as these factors can provide important context when analyzing patterns later. The next crucial step involves developing what researchers call symbolic literacy, the ability to recognize how your personal unconscious translates abstract future information into dream imagery. Everyone's symbolic system is unique, shaped by personal experiences, cultural background, and individual psychological patterns. Water might represent emotional turbulence for one person and financial flow for another. Fire could symbolize destruction, transformation, or passion, depending on the dreamer's personal associations. Keep track of the symbols and themes that appear repeatedly in your dreams, and note what real-world events follow these symbolic appearances. Over time, you will begin to recognize your unconscious mind as preferred vocabulary for communicating about different types of future events. This personal dream dictionary becomes an invaluable tool for interpreting new prophetic dreams as they occur. But perhaps the most important aspect of working with prophetic dreams is learning to trust your instinctive responses to them. Research consistently shows that the emotional impact of a dream is often more significant than its literal content. Dreams that leave you with persistent feelings of urgency, dread, or the need to take specific action are the ones most likely to contain genuine prophetic information, even if the literal content seems bizarre or impossible. This is where many people fail to benefit from their own prophetic dreams. They become so focused on trying to logically interpret the symbolic content that they ignore the clear emotional messages their unconscious mind is trying to communicate. If a dream leaves you with the strong feeling that you should avoid a particular route to work, cancel a planned trip, or check on a family member's health, these impulses deserve serious consideration, regardless of whether the dream's literal content makes logical sense. The tragic case of Eamon McEnany demonstrates the potential consequences of ignoring these internal warning systems. He had been receiving clear emotional signals for months that something terrible was going to happen at his workplace, but he dismissed these feelings as generalized anxiety rather than specific prophetic information. His death in the September 11th attacks serves as a stark reminder that prophetic dreams are only valuable if we're willing to act on the information they provide. Modern neuroscience suggests that prophetic dreams might represent the intersection of several sophisticated brain functions: the unconscious pattern recognition systems that constantly monitor our environment for potential threats, the temporal processing regions that help us plan for future events, and the emotional centers that motivate us to take protective action. When these systems work together during sleep, they can produce remarkably accurate predictions about future dangers and opportunities. The goal is not to live in fear of every dramatic dream, but to develop the discernment needed to recognize when your unconscious mind is trying to protect you from genuine future threats. This requires patience, practice, and a willingness to take small, reasonable precautions based on dream-generated intuitions, even when those precautions might seem unnecessary or illogical to others. Start with low-stakes situations where you can test your dream-based intuitions without risking major consequences. If a dream suggests you should take a different route to work, try the alternate path and see what happens. If you dream about a friend or family member in distress, reach out and check on their well-being. These small experiments will help you calibrate your personal prophetic dream system and build confidence in your ability to recognize genuine warnings. The evidence is clear. Prophetic dreams are a real phenomenon with measurable neurological correlates and practical applications for personal safety and decision-making. Whether they represent genuine precognition or sophisticated unconscious pattern recognition, they provide valuable information that can help us navigate an uncertain and often dangerous world. The question is not whether prophetic dreams are possible, but whether we're wise enough to pay attention to the warnings our own minds are trying to give us. In a world where disasters can strike without warning and life-changing events can happen in an instant, learning to recognize and trust our dream-based early warning systems might be one of the most important skills we can develop. Your dreams might be trying to protect you right now. The only question is, are you listening?